New figures show foreclosures on homes with mortgage trouble are once again on the rise. The upturn has been expected since legal challenges over the past few years have slowed the foreclosure process throughout the country. According to some experts, getting foreclosures over and done with is a way to stabilize the housing market. But there's also concern that a failure to minimize foreclosures will delay the return of stability, resulting in even more surrounding properties with values underwater. That's why consumer advocates have been asking for new foreclosure protections from the state legislature. One of them is our guest. We'd like to welcome from Greater Boston Legal Services, the senior attorney in the Consumer Rights Unit, Todd Kaplan. Thank you very much for being with us, Todd.
Thank you very much for having me.
We've been hearing some fairly encouraging news lately about the real estate market. Then we hear about these foreclosures. So is this a last bunch of painful foreclosures we're talking about, or is it something maybe worse than that?
It's really hard to tell, but what we think is going on is that the banks held off after the people probably remember the whole robo-signing scandal. We think that the banks held back on foreclosures, and also they were trying to get a settlement with the 50 state attorney generals. That settlement's gone through. They think that the scandals are behind them, and what we've seen recently is a sharp increase in foreclosure statewide. The beginning of the filings, the very first filings that are happening now. So what it says to us is that we are nowhere near the end of this problem.
What about the argument that, well, you know, there are real mortgage problems here and lenders should have the right to foreclose? What if they did foreclose on all of these properties? What would that be like for the rest of us?
Well, for the rest of us, it's really disastrous. There are impacts on our own property values. They go down. There are demands on police and fire protection which go up. And there are studies out there that show that there's up to a $1 million impact per foreclosure here in Boston. Now, it's a huge range, but it has a huge impact. And when we go in some neighborhoods, both in Boston, Chelsea, Springfield, Worcester, some of the harder hit communities, what we see are blocks of empty houses. And you can just imagine if that's happening now, if we don't stop this foreclosure mill, which is really what it is now, then we're going to see more empty, vacant buildings that are going to have a disastrous effect for the rest of us who are holding on to our homes.
Well, you're trying to have fewer of these foreclosures if possible, and you're looking for some changes in the law in Massachusetts. What do you have in mind?
Well, we actually are on the very cusp of a vote. A bill has come out of the Joint Financial Services Committee that was passed by the House with some amendments, and today the Senate Ways and Means Committee came out with its own version. This bill would basically just gnaw away at the problem. We really believe that people have to call their state senators today or tomorrow, because there's going to be a vote on Wednesday, to tell their senators that they need to have what we've proposed is mandatory mediation, that they bill the foreclosure bills that we've proposed that include everybody who's facing foreclosure, and that there be some basic protections put in there to ensure that people, their rights are protected. The bill as it is now, unfortunately, is very narrow, and it doesn't have a mediation component, and it just allows for basically a paper review. You send your papers to the bank, they send it back. That's nothing more than is happening today, and as we know, that whole system is a complete failure. What we're calling for is basically a common sense proposal. Sit down at the table with a bank, work it out. What we found in Connecticut, where they have exactly this kind of system in place, over 75% of the people that sit down at the table come up with a solution. Sometimes it's to move out. It doesn't make sense for them to stay. They don't have any more income. But in 65% of the cases where people actually sit down at the table, the bank and the homeowner work out a modification. We know across the entire country, when we study what's really going on out there, when you don't have the mandatory mediation, you don't get positive results. And the sad fact is, we're the last state in New England to adopt any kind of a mandatory mediation legislation. It's going on across all of New England and in 24 states across the country. The bill that's right now before the Senate does not have mandatory mediation. It doesn't have any face-to-face required meeting.
Well, you have a number of properties where you've got owners living in them. They really want to make a go of it, maybe get a loan modification and hang in there. But you also have these other properties, maybe it was because of fraud. You don't have owners who are living there, and it's hard to imagine them sitting down for negotiations. Does this law differentiate between those two?
It has to be an owner-occupied home, and it has to be 3 or 4 units or less. So if the owner, if it's purely an investment property, it doesn't fall within our proposal and doesn't fall with any of the bills that are pending. And what we found in Connecticut and elsewhere is when people fight for their homes. When they're there, they fight. When they've left and are gone, it goes into foreclosure. Our proposal and every single proposal that is out there that's pending in Massachusetts requires the homeowner to step up and say, I really want to hold on to my property. Those are the people that you really want to help and assist. Those are the people that often have the income, and they often, with an opportunity to sit down, they can stay in their property. It's basically common sense. The people that have walked away or don't have any income, the proposals allow those properties to be foreclosed upon.
One thing that makes this kind of homeowner relief a bit of a tough sell politically is that some people, maybe they're not as familiar with this kind of a situation, they say, oh, this is a bailout. And all these people who kept up on their mortgage payments, they feel that they're the ones who are really providing this. So they're not going to be too enthused about it, maybe.
Well, it's what you pay on your mortgage doesn't really have anything to do with what Bill or Joe pay. It's not like when you go into a store and someone shoplifts and the rest of us pay for it. These are losses that have occurred. The values have gone down. The values are going down further. We've seen that. So in terms of the benefit for you and I, or anyone else who's is still in their home and keeping up their payments, is that it actually helps our properties when we keep Bill and Joe in theirs, because our property values are maintained, our neighborhoods are maintained, the city gets more taxes. All of these things actually benefit all of us. So when we bail out somebody, it's not really a bailout. The loss has already occurred. The bank if they foreclose, they even get a further loss. So keeping somebody in their home really benefits not only our neighbor, benefits us, and actually benefits the bank too.
You might have to explain that a little bit more for viewers, because when a bank actually forecloses on a property and sells it, how do you compare that kind of money that they're getting from that sale to what might happen with a loan modification? Well,
it's truly a fire sale, because it's an auction, it's on the street, people haven't had an opportunity to go in the property and view it. There's often tenants. The condition of the property could go from good to terrible. So what they're really getting is a fire sale price. And that's just not anywhere near the value. So they lose there because they're trying to recoup the money for their investors. And then the whole process is painful and lengthy and costly. The lawyers, everything that they have to do. And then subsequently, when they sell it if they try to sell to investors, whatever, those people have to evict. Every single thing costs a lot of money. The study in Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia mandatory mediation, they have very strenuous, very clear data gathering there. They showed that there's $75,000 benefit to the banks for every modification they do. When they have to pay $75,000 more to foreclose when they don't modify the property, the loan.
What about this recent settlement between attorneys general and some of the leading lenders around the country? How much help do you think that's going to be?
Well, we really congratulate Attorney General Martha Coakley for her really, really strenuous efforts to make that happen. But it's, no matter what, it's not going to help everybody. And even the Attorney General hiring a bunch of people, they're going to hire about 20 people. They're trying to beef up legal services assistance so that when they can't help people, other people will be able to help the homeowners. We're still talking about a drop in the bucket. The best way to deal with this is mandatory mediation. You know, think about this. These are national banks. Do they really care about our communities like we do? They do not. This is an opportunity for us to take back some control for our communities and our neighborhoods and say, the buck stops here. This is where we're going to try and keep our neighbors in their homes. We're going to maintain our communities. And the only way we can really do that is by making it harder for them to foreclose and easier for them to do the thing that we all intuitively know makes sense, which is to modify these mortgages.
And of course, some of these original lenders, they weren't so much pressured into making these loans. Some of them were offering bonuses for high-risk loans. So they were really looking for this kind of trouble in some cases.
Absolutely. When you think about the spiraling values of when everybody was like, oh, don't worry, you know, you can refinance in 6 months. You got a terrible rate. It's a teaser rate. It's going to go up in 6 months or a year or 2 years. Don't worry, you can refinance. This was their game. And as long as the values were going up and up and up, it basically was this scheme where it worked. But everybody knew, especially them, the people that were selling us this bill of goods, they knew it was going to fall apart at some point. So they were just gathering in the cash while they could.
So as you mentioned, putting this on the map, at least here in Boston, I know there have been these other parts of the state that have also been hard hit by foreclosures, but in the city we're talking about which neighborhoods with the bulk of these foreclosures?
Well, I have to look at my maps here because...
I see Dorchester.
Absolutely. So you know, you're not going to be able to see this as home too well, but all of the dots here, it's just every, there are...
And I've seen some others in Roxbury, Mattapan.
Yes.
And East Boston has a fair number as well, I think.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely, absolutely. So we would encourage people in all these communities to contact Senator Hart, Senator Chang Diaz, Senator Petrocelli. These are people that are currently need to hear from their constituents that we need a better bill that's being proposed. We need to beef it up. We need to incorporate the elements that we're talking about, mandatory mediation, and including everybody that is facing foreclosure, not just a few that had predatory loans. Basically, everybody should be able to sit down at the table and say, this is why I should be able to stay in my home.